Greetings, Grand Rising. My name is Khamisi Mkweli, sometimes better known as Dr. Tao. And today we're going to be speaking about circadian rhythms of the body. Now, the human body goes through 3 cycles throughout the day. Now, keep in mind the word circadian means circle. So when we're talking about circadian, we're talking about the cycles that the body goes throughout the day. The first cycle is what we call elimination cycle, and that happens primarily between 4 a.m. and 12 noon. So the body wants to eliminate during that time period. It wants to release. That's why it's natural for us to wake up in the morning and use the restroom. After that, we go from 12 noon to about 4 p.m. and the body goes to what we call alimentation. Alimentation means the body's ready to receive food. So that's when your largest meal should be between 12 noon and 4 p.m. After that cycle, we go through what we call assimilation cycle, which is from 4 p.m. till about 7 p.m., 8 p.m. And the body wants to assimilate the food that it has eaten previously or the day before. So that meal around that time should be smaller. So basically what I'm saying is your lunch should be your largest meal and your dinner should be slightly smaller. Whereas breakfast should actually be just that, breaking a fast. So you shouldn't be consuming large cereals and granolas and types of things, especially if you're trying to lose weight. These are the cycles of the body. When we disobey these cycles, that's when illness easily creeps into the body. After 8 p.m., the body does not want to digest any more food. So if we're eating past 8 p.m., then the body has difficulty digesting those types of meals that's been acquired before then. And it causes the body to get backed up, basically, what we call constipation. And the body can only do one thing at once. So it can digest or heal, but it can't do both at the same time. So if we're eating late at night, then we know that the body is going to spend its whole night sleeping, digesting food, and not going through a healing process or proper cleansing. So we want to keep in mind that when we follow these rhythms, the body works in a more optimal state. Also, the body has to understand that these rhythms are something that we keep up, not something that we do here and there, but to keep that going. So all things in nature work off rhythms. So when we're talking about the sun or the moon, or we're talking about the earth or different planets, then we're talking about rhythms. As we see, every planet has a certain rhythm that it takes to revolve around the sun. So on planet Earth, we say it takes 365 and 1/4 of a day to revolve around the sun. If we're talking about other planets, we're talking about a different time span there. What's important to keep in mind is all things in nature function on these rhythms. Some things we may see obviously, some things we may not see as obviously. We as African peoples tend to sync most fitted with these rhythms because of the melanin in our body that allows us to sync with these rhythms. Basically, our hormones allow us to sync with 4 different cycles of nature, and in doing so, we're able to keep a certain rhythm in all things that we do. That's why we're very rhythmic people. So in the Western world, Western man only has 2 cycles. That's an earth cycle and a lunar cycle. Whereas African people, we have a lunar cycle, an earth cycle, a solar cycle, and a galactic cycle. Now what that means is whenever there's a change in the atmosphere, a change in the earth, or a change in the solar system, our body adapts and changes with that, in sync with that. So when we see certain plants, we see that certain plants are in certain cycles as well. For example, some of them are obvious, like the sunflower has a solar cycle, or marigold has a solar cycle. If we go into some things like, garlic, we call that a Mars cycle plant. So every herb, every plant has a certain cycle that it abides to. As we see, garlic is very pungent and strong, and we represent Mars as something that's very powerful or has to do with conflict or some type of strength. So in observing nature, we see that all things are following a certain rhythm. The body also has the way of showing us which organs need to be cleansed and which organs need to be, focused on. For example, if someone gets a headache at 1 a.m. in the morning or 3 a.m., that's their actual liver that's excreting waste, because every organ in the body has a certain internal clock. If a person has a headache at say 9 p.m., that's their spleen. So certain organs represent certain parts of the body, and we can detect when a person gets a certain headache at a certain time of day, and that's repetitive over a time period. We can pinpoint which part of the body actually needs to be focused on and go into a certain cleansing cycle. If it's the liver, then we could go into certain herbs like dandelion root, milk thistle, or yarrow, or yellow dock. Those types of herbs help cleanse the liver and restore it and put the iron back into it. The liver has certain functions as to keep our energy levels and to create bile. If the body's not doing that properly, or the liver's not doing that properly, then we tend to get tired. And there's an emotional component attached with the liver, which goes into depression. So sometimes we look at certain mental issues, but we kind of separate that from physical issues. But many times, if there's an underlying mental issue, there's a physical component attached to it and also a spiritual component attached to it. Now, when we're talking about eating and all things, herbs and just the full treatment of the body, we have to keep in mind it's a holistic thing. So if we're looking at the food as just something to serve us, then we're going to miss out on something called what we call spiritual nutrition. So we have to see that the food itself is a spiritual thing that's going to help not just with the physical body or the mental body, but the whole body as a whole as a spiritual body. And what we call medical astrology, the body is broken up into 12 different parts. And we go from Aries, which is the first sign of the zodiac, and we go to Pisces, which is the last sign of the zodiac. So we get a full picture of a person. What we call the Aries is the head, and Pisces is the feet. So we call that the beginning and the end, or Alpha and Omega. Now each zodiac sign represents a part of the body. So if I said Cancer, I'm talking about the person's chest, or if I'm talking about Virgo, I'm talking about someone's stomach or intestines. If I'm talking about Capricorn, I'm talking about the skeletal system, or the knees and the bones. So these rhythms are part of the zodiac system. And remember, the word zodiac comes from the word zoo and dia. So the days of the zodiac are the days of the animals. So when we're talking about astrology or anything like that, we're not talking about anything spooky. We're talking about animals, and we're talking about directions on the planet, which we call today north, south, east, and west. Today we call that global positioning system, or GPS systems that we use to locate and get to certain destinations. So it's not anything to be spooky about, but we have been taught that we should be scared of the stars and scared of certain phenomena that's natural. And for some reason we don't understand why certain things are different every year. For example, Easter. Easter happens on a different time of the year every year because Easter has something to do with the zodiac and astrology and the changes. So if you were to ask somebody what day is Easter this year, they would have to look at their calendar, because Easter falls on a different rhythm every year. And those rhythms are based off the solar cycles, lunar cycles, galactic cycles, and earth cycles. So when we're talking about Easter, we're talking about after the first full moon in the sign of Aries, that following Sunday will be Easter. So that's a rhythm that's based off a lunar cycle. All things in nature are based off circadian rhythms, And as man, we have to understand that we cannot change these things. These things are fixed. These things are hardwired. And it behooves us to follow these things, to structure ourselves and to pattern our lifestyles, and not have death styles, but to pattern our lifestyles to these rhythms so that we can have optimal health, optimal thinking, and optimal functionality. So when it comes to teaching the subjects in school, those planets that we see in space, those are also actual subjects. So if I'm talking about lunar subjects, I'm talking about literature or psychology, because that has to do with the mind, and the moon rules the mind, and the moon rises in the morning, and the sun rises in the morning, so the moon is out before that. So we want to go into those subjects early in the morning or in the evening when the moon comes back out, because the brain is more receptive to those subjects during that time of day or time of night. If we're talking about Saturn, or we're talking about Venus or certain subjects like that, we go into certain times of day. So Saturn represents agriculture. So we would teach children and students subjects in agriculture and planting and farming during that time of day that's ruled by Saturn. And so we see that all things in nature has a certain rhythm. And in understanding that, we can understand that education can be better suited towards students who are trying to acquire certain information and retain it based off those rhythms. So what I'm saying here is, whenever it's beyond just diet, it's complete lifestyle. When we're talking about dancing or music, we like certain songs based off certain rhythms, and the reason that we're able to sync with those is because of the melanin in our body. So melanin operates on 4 different hormones that happen primarily before that. So we have amino acid called phenylalanine, and phenylalanine creates tyrosine, and tyrosine creates serotonin, and serotonin creates melatonin. When you sync all 4 of those together, that's what we get. We have melanin and melatonin, and it helps us keep in rhythm with those. Also, truth follows through those cycles. So if someone is not in rhythm with the universe through phenylalanine, tyrosine, serotonin, and melatonin, they won't even be able to receive truth from another person. They'll say, this is not true, or I can't believe what you're talking about, because truth has to come in certain rhythms of the body. So this is why we get into a whole Doubting Thomas type of mentality when it comes to information that's truthful, but we're not able to receive it or apply it to our lives. So rhythm is a very important thing, especially to African people, because our school systems, even when we had the drama in the classroom, that's based off teaching mathematics, and mathematics is a solar science, and solar represents noon. So noon, solar sciences should be taught. So mathematics should be taught at 12 noon for better receptivity of the brain to receive that information. So rhythm is nothing exclusive from the body, but it's inclusive, and it's something that we should apply to ourselves each and every day and make sure that we're in it, so that becomes a natural thing and that you don't have to even think about it anymore. And that's the main thing, to bring it into the voluntary mind to the involuntary mind, which some people call the subconscious mind, so that we can go about carrying other tasks and not have to focus on following step by step by step. If I were to tell you what is, or if I was to ask you certain math problems, so for example, if I were to give you a multiplication problem, you may need a pen and paper for that. But most math problems can be done in your mind without any paper, because when you understand arithmetic, the word arithmetic means arithmetic, which means means God, rith means rhythm, and metic means cycle. So when we're talking about arithmetic, we're talking about a God rhythm cycle. So we see that the rhythm is already implanted in the subject itself. So to study mathematics is to study rhythm. To study mathematics is a form of worship, is what I'm saying. Is a way of connecting with the divine forces. And culture is nothing but a people's way of relating to unseen forces. And we as African people tend to have the ability to tap into those unseen forces beyond other people. So what I'm saying is, if you understand circadian rhythms, you understand yourself, you understand nature, and you understand God. And the purpose of all subjects is to understand thyself. Thank you.